Thank you, Helga Nowotny. Please join us here for your thoughts. It's like a master plan for our panel discussion now. Richard told us science is difficult. Of course it is. And the question you raised, how can we communicate controversial topics? Thinking about Fukushima, GMO, biotechnologies, or the benefit of safeguards in nanotechnology. Are researchers, from your point of view, are they good communicators to the broader public and the audience? And not only in those sophisticated, well-informed stakeholder parties like this afternoon.
Allow me to go back to the... Can you hear me? Yes. Allow me to go back to the question of science is complex or complicated. Richard Feynman, the physicist, once had a beautiful example, and he spoke about the Incas, and the Incas who were able to predict the sunrise of Venus. And he said there are two ways of doing this. One is you take bean bags and you count actually the astronomical calculations that are necessary to predict it, and you can do it with beans that you calculate, put in one bag, etc. Takes a long time, it's a tedious process, but you can do it in principle. The other way is you learn more advanced and complicated algorithm, and you can do it much faster. And I think this is, where the complexity becomes simplicity when you have the right technology that helps you to achieve it. And this is, I think, where technology comes in. And technology helps us also in communicating. So we use a lot of communication tools in order to communicate. It's, of course, it's writing, but it's also visuals. It's the outreach technology, and especially then when it becomes an interactive technology that is part of the communication. And I think we are in a process where certainly scientists have understood that it is important to open up. You won't find scientists who will deny it, but some are better than others in doing so. So I don't think you should, have a requirement for everyone to communicate, because after all you're there to do research. But you have to understand that each one of the scientists has to be able to make an effort to explain to your mother or to your children what are you actually doing. And I fully agree with what you said before. I mean, if you can explain it to your colleagues, you can also explain it to others and vice versa. So there is, the ability is there, the understanding is there, but we should not impose it on everyone to communicate all the time. That's at least my view.
I think the American National Science Foundation at one time imposed a requirement that when they gave a grant to somebody to do research, they had to spend some part of their effort, some fraction of their effort, into communicating what they did. And I'm not sure whether that rule still applies.
Yes, it's the broader impact.
Yes.
But it does
I suspect that a lot more scientists are very good at communicating than many people realize, and I find myself very frequently telephoned by journalists and radio and television stations and things asking me to comment on the latest scientific experiment that's been reported. And I say, why don't you just go and talk to the person who did it? You'll probably find he's a very good communicator. Don't be so lazy by just picking up the phone and asking me, because that's what you're used to, because I'm the one in your Rolodex index card. Talk to the person who actually did it, and you might be surprised. They might be very good at communicating it.
And if I may just add something here, if you ever have the opportunity to hear an ERC starting grantee speak, you will be surprised. They are excellent communicators. They did not get any training. They are just fueled by the passion, by the knowledge they have to explain the work they are actually doing. They are our best ambassadors, and they all know how to communicate. And I never met anyone who said, no, I will not come when we asked them to do it.
we are facing, as you mentioned, Helga, new tools in science communication and new media. You mentioned them: computers, Facebook, social platforms, Twitter, pads and apps. So the young generation, and we are talking about the future and how to communicate innovation for the European Union and in the European Union to make us competitive on the global scale. The young generation, they are brought up with the MP3 and iPhones and iPads. So this is not a problem. But what about the controversial topics, which is a broader audience and public is concerned? Fukushima or the GMO. How can scientists and researchers contribute in a positive manner to share the benefits and the risk? Because scientists, if you look in every survey, or Eurobarometer or whatever, scientists have high ranking in public. So what is your answer in this communication process? Do we need more researchers to go in schools, for example, to attract young people, pupils and students to choose natural science?
Well, I think with all controversies, what pays is honesty. And the public realizes very quickly when there is a non-authentic message that is being given, if things are attempted to be covered up. And there's a very fine understanding of that. So I think to communicate honestly, including what we do not know, this is sometimes hard to get across, but I think an honest answer at the right moment, we do not know, is much better received than trying to fudge it or trying to evade giving an answer. The other question, of course, is, are we doing enough? And scientists have this anxiety of the next generation. Will there be enough young people who are interested in studying science? And I think here a lot of responsibility, of course, falls on the schools and on having the best possible teachers in the schools. If you look at biographies of scientists, and I once did a little study asking people, how did you, or when did you decide, or when did you know you would become a scientist? And the answers were interesting. People were already quite young when they knew about their future career. But in terms of influence, there were two influential figures. One was a parent or family member who was a scientist or who was able to generate, the interest in science at the age of 9 or 10. And the other one was a very good teacher in school, a little bit later. And the third reason, but this came after 1 and 2, was I read a fascinating book, very often a science fiction book, that was so fascinating that for a 13 or 14-year-old, this sort of opened the channel. So I think you have to start at a much earlier age and have to rely on the kind of influences that young people respond to best. This is people you know and people whom you trust and people whom you find interesting, and you want to be somehow like them, and you want to share the kind of questions that they have and find out the answers that they were able to give to you, and you want to move in the same direction and also be able to pose questions for which you will find the answers.
So the incentive for choosing natural science and sciences is late at school, at grammar school. Richard, how did you come to deal with Darwin theory?
I've always been interested in it from, I suppose, a slightly philosophical point of view.
When did you start?
Well, I didn't really take off until university, actually, to be honest.
Okay.
I kind of drifted into science at school. But I was interested in what you were saying about well, partly the thing about scientists admitting when they don't know. And that, of course, is terribly important, because what scientists don't know is precisely what drives them. And there's a nice story which is often told about Carl Sagan, that he was asked whether he believed that there was life on other worlds. And he said he gave the correct answer, which is, I don't know. Whereupon his interrogator persisted and said, but what's your gut feeling? And Carl Sagan said, but I try not to think with my gut. But the other thing about Carl Sagan is, of course, that he was inspirational. And I think one of the problems with teaching science to children is that there's, at least in British schools, there's so much emphasis on getting hands-on experience, which in many ways is wonderful, that there's no time left for the inspirational Carl Sagan part of you're so busy learning how to use a Bunsen burner and a test tube and things that you don't get the inspiration.
Helga, you mentioned an important point. We should be driven by curiosity.
We are.
Yeah,
we are.
And we should keep it, of course.
Yes.
But I'm pretty sure that European citizens are eager and curious to know what is going on about climate change, our energy future, renewables, or how can we reach a healthy aging. So how can researchers and scientists contribute to this curiosity to the public and to the audience for better understanding?
Well, I think with the societal challenges, they are already embedded in society. They come out of society. So it's not, an expert committee in the Commission that decides now this is the most important issue, because any real societal challenge comes and arises out of society. It's recognized in society. And of course, everyone is concerned about healthy aging, because everyone wants to live longer under the best possible health conditions. Everyone is concerned about climate change in the sense that we know that the planet is at risk if we continue business as usual. I think European citizens, perhaps differently from what we see in the US, where you have a very large climate skeptic community that, in my view, is also largely driven by economic interests that underlie it. So I think we have very good starting conditions here in Europe for the societal challenges. But then, of course, comes the issue, where do you go from there? And I think there you have to communicate what is being done, that there is not the grand solution. There are many partial, smaller solutions that, taken together, and will help us to improve our lifestyle and the state of the planet, and will help us to move towards the solution. But these are small steps that need to be taken. And in the area of energy, I mean, Germany now pulled out of nuclear energy, and it's obvious you cannot do it from one day to the next. So now there will be years and years to come when you see a shift from nuclear away to other forms of energy, and it will be a different blend and mixture. And I think the public is interested to see what does it mean and what are the next steps that will be taken. So I think in Europe, for the societal challenges, we are in a very good starting position.
The European Commission, in the beginning of the 7th Framework Programme, they decided under the Science and Society Programme to urge the scientists who get European funding to deliver what you, Richard, just mentioned before, to deliver their results to a broader public, so to communicate. Would this be a request from your side to the European Commission to combine public funding with the obligation to communicate their results?
Well, as with the National Science Foundation in America, yes, I think it might. And talking of America, and Helga, your point about opposition to environmental concerns coming from commercial interests in America. I don't know whether this is the reason, but it's a fact that David Attenborough's new series on television about I think it's called The Frozen Planet, this has been bought in America by the Discovery Channel, all except for the last episode. They've not bought the last episode, and one can't help wondering whether that's because the last episode is where David Attenborough expresses his concerns about the future of the planet and global warming. And it is conceivable that the American television station simply doesn't want to offend its commercially driven public, who's got it into its head that there's no problem with climate change. I wanted to make another point, which is that we mustn't forget as science communicators that science is not just the current issues that are in the newspaper headlines, whether it's global warming or whatever it is. Science is about the universe, and it's about eternity. It's not about the thing that happens to be in the newspaper headlines today. That is important, but it's not the only thing that's important.
We are on the Innovation Convention here, and I want to quote EU Commissioner for Research, Maura Gagan-Quinn. In the opening speech, she said, Europe has to capitalize on its brightest and most innovative ideas. Yesterday afternoon, in the keynote speaking of CEO from Google, Schmidt, he thanked the Europeans, that the European researchers and scientists delivers amazing technologies like MP3 or the internet, which was all invented from European scientists and researchers. And the US and other regions of the world, they capitalized it. Why are we not able to foster innovation and bring it to market and to services in the benefit of the European Union and for the entire world, but to capitalize it here on this European continent?
When some of the obstacles are well known, beginning with the European patent that was mentioned in the opening speech by President Barroso, how long it took Europe to agree on a common European patent. And a patent, you would think, is a very simple thing. And yet, given the diversity we have in Europe, which in principle is a good thing, but you would wish that Europe indeed sometimes gets its act together much, much faster. And in the present crisis, we may be forced to get our act together faster. So some of the major obstacles impeding innovation or impeding innovation to proceed at sufficient pace have to do with the diversity of legal regulations, of national regulations. So we are, compared to the US, we do not have the same kind of unitedness. We are not a United States of Europe. This is a fact.
Helga, I'm sorry to... You mentioned the community patent. This is a long-lasting story for about 20 years now.
Yes.
And Europe cannot come through. And just right today, latest news, a half an hour ago before we started here, for the Research Council today, the ministers of research of the European Union, they didn't agree again on this crucial point of community patent. Why? First of all, there is the language regime. It should be in the beginning that the patents for the small and medium enterprise should be translated in English, French, and German, but it was blocked by Italy and Spain. This is to some extent solved, but what they didn't solve, and the Polish presidency was keen to announce it today that after 20 years this discussion came through, but no, it didn't. Why? Because they couldn't find an agreement among UK, France, and Germany where to settle down the patent court. Okay, this is European stories. So, but we should, of course, perhaps tip the role of the media. What do you think, Richard? your audience are, first of all, millions of readers, of book readers. Which role should the media in this process for a better understanding of science and technology offensively play?
Well, if we take, for example, television, there are some very good television documentaries on science and some very bad ones. If I could single out one fault that I would like to see changed, it's the automatic presumption by television people that you have to have a balanced picture with, on the one hand, so-and-so says something, and on the other hand, somebody else says the opposite. In many ways, of course, it's laudable that both sides of an argument should be put and that people should make up their mind between them. But that does presuppose that there are two sides of the argument. It doesn't mean that you have to go out and find some maverick lunatic who not exactly thinks the Earth is flat, but it's not far off that sometimes, all in the interests of balance. And we've had some truly shocking television documentaries in Britain which have taken the maverick, the rebel, and built him up to hero status, when this has turned out to be complete nonsense, and in some cases pernicious nonsense, as in the case, for example, of the MMR vaccine rumour, where Channel 4 in Britain actually took this, I won't call him scientist, who promoted the idea that the MMR vaccine caused autism in children, and made him into a hero. Had a docudrama, as they call it, with a handsome young actor playing him and making him out to be a sort of hero, winning out against the old guard of the scientific establishment. So this, just one little complaint. Let's have balance for its own sake. Let's have balance only when balance really exists. As one of my colleagues said, when two opposite points of view are expressed with equal force, the truth does not necessarily lie halfway between.
What Richard just described, I can confirm. That's what's happening in public funded television stations. I worked 5 years for the public television science magazine in Cologne, and as you described, you have to mention always two sides of the medal. But journalists are often criticized that they do it not this way, but they only emphasize on catastrophe and of the exceptional point of views, Fukushima, whatever. So, do you think, Helga? And I'm coming to you.
Yeah, I just want to add another example to what you said. And several here in the audience will remember that before the Hadron Collider experiment got started in CERN, we had another lunatic, who predicted this will be the black hole and the world will go to hell. While at the same time, there was a black hole that was created, but it was in the financial market.
The new technologies, Helga, you mentioned them, social platforms. Do you think that there will be a proper tool to address better and directly a broader audience and citizens about results, about risk and benefits?
Well, probably we have not completely exploited and used some of the old tools, because television was mentioned. Now, television, of course, has different formats, as you know. And one television program that has an enormous following and I think is really worthwhile to look at are the Mythbusters. I don't know how many of you have ever seen one of their performances. And it's a fantastic program because these were two people in America who set out to bust myths. So they take questions, is it true that? And then they build experiments to show is it true or not. So they did not set out to communicate science, but in fact this is what they are doing. And I had the opportunity to speak to one of them, how they get to their questions, etc. And he told me two things that I find quite remarkable. First of all, he told me that now engineering students demand to get away from learning engineering only in the virtual world. Engineering students ask their teachers, can we build something again? Because we have seen it on Mythbusters, what's being done. Yes. Quite remarkable for engineering students. And secondly, that they get a lot of the questions from their fan audience. So there are people coming up with these questions, and it reinforces a kind of critical thinking, because the underlying assumption is don't take it for granted what you are being told or what you hear. Think about it. Can it be true that? And then you go in a hands-on situation, and not everyone, of course, can do it, but this is what the television program is all about. So, you can do it in a boring way and in a sort of pedantic way, but you can also have some exciting programs. And the new media, I think these scientific discovery games are wonderful new tools, and they involve both the scientists who have to come up with what is it you want to discover, and to create the discovery games. But then you can communicate with the young audience that goes along, and you participate, you widen the people who do research with you in a very interesting way.
Though you have hope that the lacking 500,000 engineers until 2025 could be among the young apps users of iPhones.
We may get some from outside of Europe to come and work in Europe, but others we can also grow at home.
Richard, what is your Christmas wish besides a good selling number of your books?
Well, I would wish for more skepticism, more critical thinking, exactly as Helga says. Unfortunately, I've never seen Mythbusters. I'll look out for it. But what I have seen is on British television, television programs that flagrantly promote what they call the paranormal. And David Frost, for example, who's a very high...
It's the country of ghosts.
Yeah, that's right. And so David Frost, who's a very high-prestige television presenter in Britain, would have a long string of what were obviously stage magicians, conjurers coming on, but they were pretending that they were not stage magicians. They were pretending that they had paranormal powers and could actually break the laws of physics. I remember one, for example, was a father and son team. They happened to be from Israel, and they were demonstrating telepathy. And so the son would turn up a card which had a number on it, and then he would transmit the number to his son, who was blindfolded on the other side of the stage. And the son would get the number right, and David Frost would say, "Amazing! Amazing! Incredible! It's paranormal." Obviously, this is a very, very simple conjuring trick. I don't know how they did it. I mean, my guess is the father would do something like shout out, "Can you do it, son? Can you do it, son? 5. Okay? I mean, I don't know if that's how he did it, but that's a fairly obvious way in which he might have done it. But my complaint is not the showing of conjuring tricks on television, but the presenting of conjuring tricks as though they were violating the laws of physics. And what I would like to see, and it sounds as though Mythbusters does it, is to have a show like that, but then have the audience sing out ways in which they thought it might be done. Like I've just suggested one way, but I could imagine that an audience would be filled with people who could make suggestions for how this thing might be done, to have the audience actually participate in myth-busting. Maybe that's what they do. I'm not...
No, they do it in a different way. Yeah. But, magicians can be great science communicators.
Yes, they can.
If you take a magician like Randy, who does a number of programs to deconstruct the tricks, and you learn a lot, not only how the tricks are being done, but you also learn what is the sort of assumption that goes into it. I mean, and the sort of how the human mind works. Because after all, these tricks work with knowledge of how our minds work. And so you learn a lot about cognitive science and how we function.
I agree, it's immensely instructive. Frustratingly, though, what happens is that they will see Randy demonstrate how one of these charlatans does it. And people say, oh, okay, well, that one's a trick, but I bet that one isn't.
So thanks a lot. From one of the initial questions, are women or men better communicators? On this panel, it's quite clear. Both are excellent communicators, and we witnessed it this afternoon, and we are encouraged that always in the future, with your ideas and thoughts, the public will understand better risk and benefits of science and technology in Europe. Thanks a lot for your attention and in the audience.